Welcome to Let's Talk Business Phoenix, the Greater Phoenix Chamber's podcast. I'm your host, Todd Sanders, President and CEO of the Greater Phoenix Chamber. Each week, we tackle key issues affecting businesses, the community, and state, aiming to drive growth and overcome challenges while uniting community leaders to move Phoenix forward.
Let's Talk Business Phoenix was produced in partnership with Ideas Collide, an agency offering a full suite of custom marketing solutions for your brand's unique challenges. Make a connection at ideascollide.com.
Welcome back to the podcast. We're excited to have you here today. We have a very special guest, Shawn Bradford, who's the Senior Vice President for Regulated U.S. Water for EPCOR, is here today. Shawn, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity. Really happy to be here.
Appreciate that. Well, obviously, you're well known in the community, but for those who don't necessarily know you, tell us a little bit about Shawn and maybe something we wouldn't know that's not on your bio.
Yeah, so I've been in the utility space for my entire career. I started actually on the East Coast, grew up outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and started out in the field as a utility worker and went back to school at night 3 times, raised a family in the middle of all that, and moved around in the country and made my way to Arizona in 2006, and I've been here ever since.
So kind of right before the Great Recession, you got here.
Got to see the boom and the bust.
Yeah, you did.
Yes, yeah, interesting times back then.
Okay, and something about you that we wouldn't necessarily know.
So I relocated to Goodyear, Arizona, and I had an opportunity to join Frederick Country Partnership, an amazing organization, really support the mission on the base. And as an honorary commander, I got an opportunity to fly in an F-16, and they actually let me fly the jet for about 20 minutes.
Really?
Yeah, very cool experience.
And did you use the airsick bag?
I got close, but no, I did not.
Awesome.
Yes, but very close.
Yeah,
Yes.
a lot of blue sky, a lot of brown earth, and kind of mixing in between.
Amazing. I got to pull 5 Gs in a turn.
Really? Did you stay awake?
I got very close to not staying awake, to going to sleep. He told me, don't pull back if you don't want to pass out. I said, so I won't pull back that hard. So
okay.
Really good instructions. Yes.
Well, great. They do great work, and certainly, Luke, critical for us here in Arizona.
Amazing. Yes, amazing organization.
Just like water. So EPCOR, I think, is well known to people. People know the name, but maybe don't necessarily understand what the mission is. Tell us a little bit about the company.
Yeah, so we're a private utility. We're actually owned by the city of Edmonton, so in Alberta, Canada. Yes. Mm-hmm. So back in the mid-90s, they made a decision to privatize their water and power utility, and with an edict of growing. So we're an independently run organization. We have an independent board of directors, and we've grown our utility now for the past 25, 30 years across 4 provinces in Canada, and we moved into the United States in 2011. We acquired a utility in Fountain Hills, and then have grown across the southwestern U.S. since then. So now we're in Arizona, New Mexico, and the state of Texas.
And in Arizona, that footprint has grown significantly. I think you're probably busting at the seams in your current offices, looking to move, I hear. What's the story there?
Yeah, so we've seen organic growth in the double digits for the better part of a decade. Just recently added our 100,000th new connection in the West Valley. So 100,000 homes have been built in the West Valley in just the past 12 years. So tremendous growth. We've grown from about 170 employees to over 600. And to your point, we're actually moving our U.S. headquarters to Glendale, Arizona in the fall.
Excellent news. So clearly there's an interesting story here in terms of growth, but the company, most people are familiar with municipal water providers. Talk to us a little bit about the difference.
Yeah, so the private water space is a bit unique. We're about nationally about 15 to 20% of the market. In the state of Arizona, actually 1 in 4 folks that live in the state get water from a private water utility like EPCOR. We're by far the largest in the state of Arizona, and we're seeing our footprint continue to grow.
So when we talk service territory, what would we be thinking about?
So Metro Phoenix, we're in Buckeye, Peoria, Surprise, Goodyear. We're in parts of Glendale, Phoenix, Scottsdale, Paradise Valley, Fountain Hills. And our most recent acquisition, we purchased the troubled utility in Santan, Johnson Utilities, purchased that about 3 years ago, and we've been down there running that utility and now owning it for the better part of 5 years.
And certainly, we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but certainly the Rio Verde as well.
Yes, Rio Verde Foothills.
Sure.
That was the one that made international news, a really unique story around Rio Verde Foothills.
Absolutely.
And how we ended up getting there.
And a fascinating story, which we'll get back to here in a minute. So clearly a growth engine, I think a really cool Arizona success story in terms of where you started, where you are today. Talk to us a little bit about your role.
So I lead the regulated business unit. So for us, that's utilities that are regulated in Arizona by the Arizona Corporation Commission and in New Mexico by the PRC, the Public Regulatory Commission. That's the majority of our business in the Southwestern United States. The regulated part of our business serves close to 1 million people across 28 communities in 3 states. So pretty large operational footprint. And I lead the business unit on a day-to-day basis, and I make sure that we're positioned not only to provide service to customers on a day in and day out basis, but that we're looking to the future, making sure that as the state continues to grow, EPCOR has opportunities to grow.
What are some of your biggest challenges day to day?
Right now, it's people, it's resources. Okay. The economy in Arizona is booming. The economy in Texas is booming, and we're seeing some tension there, getting a quality staff, making sure that the people that we have, we can retain, and then going out and finding those qualified operators to run our systems.
Tell us a little bit about your leadership style.
So for me, it's about empowering our people to make decisions, and we really try to push that down into the field. We're out touching our customers on a day in and day out basis, and I want to make sure that the staff that are out in the field that are working with our customers have the abilities to make the decisions that are necessary so that our customers can go back and feel that they were satisfied. We have an internal metric where we want to make sure that we have first call resolution. So if you're a customer of EPCOR's and you call and you have an issue, we want to make sure that we resolve that issue on the first time you reach out to us. So if we have to roll a truck, we want to make sure that truck fixes the issue, addresses your concerns, answers your questions. Or if you just need to speak to a customer care agent, we want to make sure that they provide you the answers that you need so that your questions are resolved and you go home satisfied.
Well, that's huge. You have obviously a lot of responsibility.
Yes.
And great when things are going well. How do you handle mistakes?
I think you try to learn from them. And my big thing is you don't want to make the same mistake twice. And I think for the most part, we do a pretty good job at that. When you're talking about public water, it's the health of the community. So you don't have an opportunity to be right most of the time. You have to be right all of the time. So we really focus on safety, and we make sure that we focus on water quality to the customer.
Sounds like a really great culture.
Yeah, it's a good organization to work for.
So we mentioned the New York Times and the fact that there's I think a lot of misunderstanding, and sometimes you might see a headline that's obviously misleading, but you have to dig in for the information. Give us a sense for Arizona's water situation. Where do we stand?
So first off, water scarcity isn't anything new for the state of Arizona. We've done a tremendous job growing our state for the past 70 plus years. And a statistic I like to throw out that kind of fascinates some folks is that we're using the same amount of water today that we did in the 1950s. And that's through water conservation and water reuse and being good stewards of the environment. So we're used to dealing with a scarce water supply. We live in the desert. You just have to go outside to recognize that you're in a desert environment. And I think we've done a really good job positioning the state for growth. We've got some upcoming challenges, though. We've got some additional pressures on the Colorado River, and we're going to, I think, expect to see additional call downs in terms of the water that will be allocated to Arizona, and that's going to create some challenges for us. But I think we have tremendous opportunity. There's some areas of the state that we haven't tapped into those water resources, and I think there's opportunities to continue to push infrastructure and new technologies into the ground to generate more water and stretch the water that we have as far as we can.
Well, I'm sure you have on your team people who can forecast weather, way into the future, and your hydrologists. Clearly, the Colorado is a big focus for us. What are they telling you for the next year? What should we be expecting?
I think for the next year, the level of cuts we've seen in the last 2 years, we expect to be maintained in place through 2025. Okay. So we're in that tier 1 level shortage, and we expect to see that continue into the near future. I think longer term, we expect to see additional cuts on the Colorado River. I think ADWR is doing a good job getting all of our statewide stakeholders to a table. We're a part of the Governor's Water Council. There's 46 members that are really focused on what are the next set of water regulations we need to put into place so that the state of Arizona can continue to grow. And we're laser focused on that. And that's about using the limited resources we have as best as we can. But it's also planning for the future. Like, we need to be looking at things like direct potable reuse or desalination. Those are opportunities for us. We don't necessarily need them today or even tomorrow, but in the next 10 or 20 years, those are going to be water resources that I think are going to need to be brought to the table so that Arizona can reach its full potential.
And so, obviously, you're a for-profit organization. Water is your livelihood. Sounds like you're, as a company, still bullish on Arizona.
Absolutely. Yeah, we think it's a great place to have a business. We think it's a great place for people to relocate their businesses to. And we think that we have the water portfolio, certainly in our service territory, to meet our future growth demands.
And so what do I'm sure you have casual conversations. You travel around the country and people say, well, I wouldn't want to move to Arizona because they seem to have a lack of water. What do you tell people?
Well, first off, you have to, I think, get into the details on a little bit. What does that exactly mean? There's water scarcity. There's no way of getting around that. I think we need to set some additional groundwater rules, so in terms of how we pump the groundwater that we do have in our aquifers and manage those a bit more prudently. I think we have to maximize the amount of water that we do have in the Colorado River. I can tell you when we reach out to smaller communities across the country, water loss is a huge issue. I mentioned Johnson Utilities, a fairly large utility. It had over 28% water loss when we acquired it.
Define that a little bit for people who might not be familiar.
For every gallon of water we pumped out of the ground, we lost about 25% of that water on the way to the customer's house.
Through leaks in system.
Through leaks and just failing infrastructure. And we actually recently identified a leak that we estimate to be 1 million gallons a day. And the operational data we have shows that has been leaking at that rate for 10 plus years under the prior ownership. And we used artificial intelligence, actually. We worked with Microsoft on analyzing data to determine where in this water line this leak was occurring. And we were able to go out very quickly and very cheaply, fix it, and essentially generate a new source of supply for our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Didn't know it was there. And I'm assuming at some point that water will be recoverable in the aquifer.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So the water that's leaked into the ground, we will be able to pull back out. Now that that's not happening, we've got an additional 1 million gallons of capacity for future growth.
Absolutely. So, people think about the water situation a lot differently. Sometimes they think it has to do with more supply. Sometimes it's conservation. How do Arizonans do in terms of conservation? What grade would you give us as a state in terms of a people that think about conservation and act on it?
I can tell you that our per customer or per capita water consumption continues to drop. So I think we're doing a really, really good job. I'd say B+. So you can always be better. I think when you work with developers and landowners, they're doing a really good job on smart development, increasing density in areas where it makes sense, making sure that we're using the right type of landscaping materials on the outside so that you're minimizing your outdoor water usage. And then all the high efficiency appliances and fixtures that we see that manufacturers are now bringing to market are stretching those water resources even further.
So that low water use dishwasher makes a difference.
100%. The laundry washing machine is a huge improvement. The front load washing machines use a fraction, about a third of water that a traditional washing machine would use.
So if you could tell us the one thing that could make a difference for all of us, that one thing we should be thinking about, what is that one thing?
Outdoor water usage. It's 60 to 70% of the water that's delivered to your home goes outside. So it's really a matter of making sure that if you want grass, you can have grass. I don't think I'm not an anti-grass guy, but if you want grass, you need to know how to water it. You need to know to water it right, and you need to be able to monitor for leaks. Irrigation systems are prone to leakage, and there's some simple ways to read your water meter on your own. There's technology we're rolling out in Santan that's going to actually alert customers when their water consumption's high. We'll actually be able to send you a push text message to say, Todd, we've detected water leakage in your home for 24 hours. You may have a problem with your indoor or outdoor fixture, and that would allow you as a homeowner to go out and fix that problem before you waste a bunch of water.
Well, and get the bill, because
yes,
that would be a significant
huge impact.
Number.
Yes.
Don't necessarily have to get rid of your grass. I'll think about it, but if you do, make sure that you're doing it in a way that's going to minimize the loss.
Correct. And all of the landscaping plants and materials that you have around your yard, make sure that you've got the right ones that are really acclimated to a desert lifestyle, and that you're watering those correctly as well. And you should be adjusting your outdoor irrigation timer 2 to 3 times a year based on the season. So in the summer, obviously you're going to water it a little bit more, but we're getting close to now where you can start to wind that back. And then you're going to make another adjustment January, February, when it gets really cold for a few months. And that's going to save you a tremendous amount of water and ultimately help the environment.
Makes sense. Kind of like our pools in the winter, they don't go down.
Correct.
Summer, they evaporate.
It doesn't evaporate, yes.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, you mentioned infrastructure and the importance of modernization and the technology associated with it. What's out there on the horizon that you think we really need to focus on?
So first off, there's, I don't know how many thousands of wastewater treatment plants across the state of Arizona, those wastewater treatment plants really need to be focused on cleaning the wastewater that they receive to the highest standards possible, and then either reusing or recharging that water back into the aquifer. So EPCOR has an internal target. It's actually in our sustainability report for the company, where we target 93% of the wastewater we receive, we directly reuse it or recharge it into the ground. And we're over 95%. That's what our actual performance is. So it's taking that water that comes from a customer, you send it to their tap, they use it, they send you back wastewater. It's making sure that all of that wastewater goes to a beneficial reuse. Either recharge it into the aquifer and recover it later, or send it to a customer that they can use that water instead of pumping additional groundwater or surface water resources to, say, water grass or grow agricultural crops, things of that nature.
Well, and I think we've all heard about the idea that you could have wastewater become drinking water, and certainly it's not new. The space station does it. I know in Israel it's a normal thing, but I think here it's maybe just a cultural.
We've been doing it. The reality is we've been doing it for 20 plus years. So we have what we call indirect potable reuse. So we take our wastewater that's been treated, we inject it back into the ground, and then we pull it back out and use it as drinking water. So it's indirectly being used by customers. You can very easily make it direct potable reuse and go right from the back of the wastewater treatment plant, run it through some advanced purification systems, and then deliver it to customers' taps. And we're actually partnered with the City of Phoenix. They're looking at a very large DPR facility at their 91st Avenue wastewater treatment plant, and we're one of the partners. And we're actually going forward with a feasibility study to look at what are the costs. The technology is the easy part. It's the messaging to make sure that customers understand what it is that they'll be consuming, and it's really cost. It's going to really be driven by how expensive will that water be.
So beyond the sort of cultural side of it, let's talk about the science. So we obviously have wastewater coming in. What's coming out? Tell us, what does that look like?
So what's coming out of, like, say, the 91st Avenue wastewater treatment plant is A+ class effluent. So it's graded very similar to like school. You can have a C class plant, a B class plant. A+ class is the highest quality effluent that a wastewater treatment plant can produce. You can directly use that on athletic fields. So if you had a baseball stadium or a football stadium, you can put that right out there on the grass. It's not going to get anyone sick. There's no bacteria. We test for bacteria on a daily basis. To take it the next step, there's additional filtration. You want to make sure that any microbes or any other bacteria has been fully removed from that water supply. So you run it through some advanced filtration systems, and then at that point it's considered potable and you can drink it without any issues.
And when we get to scale, which I think we will,
yes,
what is going to be the impact for Arizona to have something like that in play?
So the 91st Avenue plant, I was just on a panel last week with the City of Phoenix. I think they mentioned that at full build out, that could deliver 90 million gallons of a new water supply into Metro Phoenix. And the thought is the City of Phoenix would reuse all of the water that's generated from that facility. And then a partner like EPCOR would get an exchange where we would send them wastewater. They would take the wastewater that's ours, treat it, clean it, and then directly reuse it. And then as an offset, we would get an allocation of, say, CAP water, CAP water, that we could then use and run it through our surface water treatment plants and deliver that new resource to our customers.
Okay, so it's a symbiotic relationship, and
100%.
Beyond just that one plant, as we look to adopt this across the state, this could really take a significant bite out of the quote unquote shortage.
100%. I mean, desal is always what we call the moonshot, or there's been talk about moving water from the Mississippi floodplain all the way over to the southwestern United States. That's a long putt. That's a lot of effort.
That's a long way.
We don't have any oceanfront property in the state of Arizona. So you're talking about a desal plant in Mexico, and that really is going to involve two countries, or the state of California and all the environmental requirements there. So I think things like direct potable reuse is the next logical step before you look at the larger moonshot type desalination projects.
Excellent. Well, it's something that's certainly in the horizon, and it's another arrow in the quiver for us
100%
here in Arizona. Obviously, another part of this is policy. You mentioned the allocation from the Colorado River and where we are in terms of the compacts, but also here in Arizona, there's been some legislation. I believe you were involved last session in some legislation. You want to speak to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So it was we first off, we appreciate the effort of Governor Hobbs and the legislature and really moving water to the front of the line. There was I think 70 plus bills that started out at the beginning of session that related around water. We were happy to see a big one for us was the Harquahalo legislation. So in 1991, there was some regulation that was passed that really was put in place to protect rural Arizona from large water exportation. They were worried about companies coming in, public-private entities coming in and pumping all this groundwater that's needed to provide rural service to customers and moving that into the large metropolitan areas. But the legislation set aside some basins, and one of them was the Harquahala Basin that does allow for water importation into the valley. And the legislation really leveled the playing field, and it allowed private entities like EPCOR to have access to that water. Our argument's always been our customers are residents in Surprise or Peoria or Goodyear or Buckeye. They're not private customers that don't provide benefit to the greater community. They're members of the cities and towns that we provide service to. They're citizens. So not having EPCOR have access to water like that could generate higher costs for our portion of, say, Surprise customers, where Surprise could access that water. So now that legislation's passed, that's going to open up, I think, the first large basin of water that can be imported into the valley. And that's the next, I think, big tranche of water that's going to come in. And then as that continues to develop, I'll have to look at McMullen and Butler and move those water supplies into the state. It's new for us in Arizona. If you look at Texas, they've been doing that for the better part of 2 decades, and they're very comfortable with interbasin transfers, having the necessary controls in place so that the rural customers are still protected. You don't over-allocate, but that's something that we do across the country. It's new for us here in Arizona, so it's taken some time, taken some legislative changes to get there, but I think this is a new bucket of water that really opens up development, really on the west side of the valley, especially. Buckeye could really benefit from Harquahala water.
Sure, and there's so much opportunity in the Buckeye area for new development as well. Obviously, policy is a job that's never done.
No.
There's always more. Anything in the future you're thinking about in terms of a policy, some sort of policy move for Arizona?
So ag to urban was a big discussion point in the last legislative session. Ultimately, a bill got to the governor's desk and she made the decision to veto it. I think some additional work needs to be done in Pinal County as well as in Maricopa County on the impact that this conversion of having agricultural land be extinguished and having urban development, city development occur on top of it. We need to make sure that we do it in a way that's reasonable so that as the agricultural usage is converted, you're doing it in a way that there's a net benefit to the aquifer.
So that it's done in an appropriate way.
Correct. And I think the governor's sent some clear policy signals that if we pull a gallon of water out, we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to put some of that water back in so that there's a net benefit to the aquifer, which is the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And you mentioned the city of Phoenix. Obviously, there's a lot of municipalities that within your area, your service area. How do you work with the municipalities, or you mentioned CAP, Central Arizona Project, our friends at SRP, in doing the work that you do here in Arizona?
So the first thing for us is we have to provide safe, reliable service to our customers. That's kind of our table stakes. So the first thing we need to do is take care of our customers, which are residents of all these communities. Once we're able to accomplish that, and I think we have a pretty dedicated track record that shows that we're really good at providing that safe, reliable service, then it's about getting out into the community, finding areas of need. We spent a lot of time in Santan, that's our most recent acquisition, making sure that community is not only provided service from a wastewater perspective, but are there organizations and agencies that align with our values about giving back to the community and making sure that there's opportunities for EPCOR, not only as a company, but we encourage our employees with a thing called Helping Hand Grants, where if an employee dedicates 30 hours of their time, we in turn give that employee a check to support their organization.
Well, and I think that shows that you're involved in more than just a service territory, but also in our community.
Yes.
I want to kind of get your sense for where you expect EPCOR to be in the next 5 to 10 years.
So,
what's that look like?
Yeah, I think you're going to see us continue to grow across the southwestern United States. We think that the water market is a great market to be in. We think we have some unique expertise, especially around troubled utilities. We think that we have a secret sauce where we can go into a troubled utility, big or small, make all the necessary improvements in a pretty quick timeline. Johnson Utilities is a great example. We've put close to $250 million of investment in the ground in 3 years. So we can move very quickly, investing large quantities of money to improve quality of service and really the quality of life of those customers. And we think that's attractive as water scarcity continues to be an issue, as some utilities fall behind and don't make the necessary investments. We think EPCOR is uniquely positioned to go in and help those communities, help those utilities, and then all the organic growth that we see in the valley. I think the West Valley is just halfway there. I don't even know if it's halfway. there's a lot of upward mobility and a lot of upward growth that I think we're going to see across the West Valley. And EPCOR wants to be positioned to be able to serve all of that growth.
Well, it sounds like a major player too on the conservation side.
100%. 100%. And that's a pillar of safety is a huge component for us, but also water conservation, whether it's direct water reuse, water leakage. We're really happy to report that the majority of our systems that we've owned and operated for an extended period of time have water less than 10%, which is considered world class.
Yeah. So what's the industry standard there?
You want to be under 10. Most of our systems are right around 5. We've taken Johnson Utilities. It was 28 when we'd acquired it. It's sitting at 12 as of last month. So again, more work to be done. It's still at 12. I want to get it to 6 or 7%. So reduce it by another 50% where it's already at. But going from 28 to 12 in 3 years is pretty impressive.
Absolutely. Well, I spent a few weeks in the Netherlands this summer, and it's interesting to go to a place. We both have water challenges. They have the opposite.
Yes.
They have a little too much, but it's good to know that we have you and EPCOR here in Arizona that's a part of a solution in terms of making sure there's an adequate water supply and certainly conservation that will serve us well.
100%
for
yes.
decades to come.
Yes, agreed.
Well, we're gonna finish off with a quick lightning round, if you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
I thought it was good to know you in a different way. So, what was your first job?
I worked at an aquarium.
An aquarium?
Yes, a fish aquarium.
Okay.
So I was around water
in Boston.
In Framingham, Massachusetts.
What did you do?
I cleaned the fish tanks. So I'm the low person on the totem pole, right? I was 14 years old, and I was the guy that went in and cleaned up all the fish tanks. So
ironically, in water.
And yes,
you got
salt and fresh water.
That's
aquariums.
where you got your gills.
Yes.
Okay. What'd you learn?
You got to take care of the customer, and you got to do good maintenance. If you don't stay on top of maintenance, it's going to come back to bite you. And aquariums are a great example of that.
That'd be a good place to learn the lessons of maintenance. First concert?
AC/DC.
Oh, excellent.
Yes.
Excellent.
Back in Black Tour, 1982-ish,
Okay,
I think.
I highly respect that. Very good. First car?
A 1977 Malibu Classic station wagon.
Oh, that's very specific. I like that.
That was my parents had a station wagon. That's what we drove way pre minivan days. And that was the first car that my dad, it was a hand-me-down. He gave it to me, but it was a Malibu Classic station wagon, like an orange colored. It was horrifically bad.
That's perfect.
Color. Yeah.
Well, and of course, little did he know that that's where you're going to stuff like 100 of your best friends.
I had lots of kids.
Right?
Yeah, there was no seatbelt laws back in the day, so we had lots of kids going to concerts. In the back of that station wagon.
I could see that. Very good. I like that. What's your hidden talent to wrap this up?
Pretty good cook.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty good cook.
What's your specialty?
I make a really good meatball, veal, pork, and beef, and I love to sous vide. I'm a sous vide now on steak. Yeah, I really like cooking steak.
So what's the so you mentioned the 3 meats. What's the secret? We won't tell anybody.
It's 2 pounds of beef, a pound of pork, and a pound of veal, and it just makes the meat a little bit more tender, a little bit more tasty with the veal. And then it's, a bunch of herbs and which we won't talk about. That's the secret. That's the secret part. But yeah, that's one of my specialties. My wife won't eat a meatball out anywhere.
Wow. Okay. So you've definitely reached the pinnacle.
If she's happy, I'm happy.
That's right.
100%.
There you go. Talk about a happy customer, right?
Yes.
Very good. Well, thank you for spending this time with us. Thanks for all the work you're doing in the community. And we'll look forward to circling back with you soon as more information comes to light in terms of where we are and where we're headed on water.
Appreciate the opportunity and really thank the Chamber for everything you guys do. You do a phenomenal job.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching this episode of Let's Talk Business Phoenix. Please take a moment to tap the follow or subscribe button for more great podcast episodes to help your business thrive.